Good afternoon to one and all present. My study for the presentation is entitled The Influence of a Spiritually Mediated Ontology on Suicidal Behavior, a Case Study. I need to ask for your forgiveness in advance because I was told to prepare a presentation for approximately 10 minutes. So I'll try to the best of my ability to cut it down. As you can see, I'm from the psychology department at Rhodes University in South Africa, and it's an absolute pleasure to actually be in India, I must say. Okay, I just want to provide a brief context of this presentation. This presentation basically forms a very small component of my PhD study. The PhD basically looked at the process of suicidal behavior and associated pathways in 4 university students in South Africa. We do know that youth suicide is a major mental health problem, and many studies have actually spoken to this. Not just in South Africa and the United States, but in Australia, in Austria, in Switzerland, and so forth. Now, within this cohort, university and college student suicide has also received tremendous attention, and studies have found that there is an increasing incidence of university student suicide as well in many countries, including South Africa. Now, the entire PhD was basically situated within a social constructionist paradigm. Interviews were conducted over a duration of 1 hour with each participant, and the data was analyzed. What's that? Okay, the data was analyzed using grounded theory analysis as advocated by Kathy Kamez. Now, for this presentation, I'll be basically looking at the case study of Megan, which I consider to be an exemplar case study because it shows the suicidal career of an individual going through absolute severe suicidal suffering and then being able to actually construct a sort of spirituality and existential well-being for herself that actually dealt with this suicidal suffering. The case study of Megan, a brief historical background and demographic profile of Megan as of 2008, during which the interviews were conducted. Megan was a 23-year-old South African female student of Asian descent studying towards a Master of Science degree. She had a history of suicidal and self-injurious behavior spanning approximately 15 years, which started at the age of 8. She had 3 suicide attempts. 2 could be categorized as 2 near-fatal attempts, which included a near-hanging and near-drowning episode. 1 could be categorized as non-fatal, referring to the overdose attempt, and 4 reported self-injurious episodes that included cutting and burning. It is interesting to note that Megan consulted with 5 psychologists during a period of 3 years, which she experienced as, quote, damaging in finding my true self and purpose in life, unquote. Consultations with psychologists were interestingly also met with multiple independent diagnoses, including major depression, borderline personality disorder, panic disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, bipolar disorder. The suicidal career also included 3 psychiatric hospitalizations, which added a diagnosis of psychotic disorder, but also included a common thread of major depression. Megan was on psychotropic medication, which included at different times a combination of mood stabilizers, antidepressants, antipsychotic medication, benzodiazepines, or anti-anxiety medication. In terms of the medication, Megan said, quote, the medication was okay at times, like when I was anxious and it calmed me down, but I was still very depressed about my life, unquote. Now, a common thread which runs through Megan's narrative about her life experiences is what we actually call existential despair, something that is very well known. In terms of Megan, this is what she said, I quote, I hate life, I hate myself, this world is so corrupt, why am I here in this world? I'm full of pain all the time. I'm walking around like with 3rd-degree burns all the time, in pain, in mental agony. And who can help me? Nobody, not even the psychologist. And no tablets can help me too. Now, Van Rooyen and Buke write a very, very interesting article in which they speak about the human being's essential need for existential well-being. And one can actually realize that in Megan's narrative, there seems to be a compromised need for existential well-being. It wasn't fulfilled. Now, grounded theory analysis of the entire case study showed 5 phases of the suicide process in terms of Megan's life experiences, originally conceptualized and unprecedented in the literature. Unfortunately, I won't have the time to cover this. But what I will be looking at...
You can take 2-3 more minutes because some of them are not coming.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, that's a relief. So basically, the results pointed to a schematic conceptualization of suicidal behavior. Just to provide a brief diagrammatic view, if you have to just look at the phases which are dynamically related, what the results actually showed was a construction of multiple pathways within these phases and the operation, existence, and working of these schemas across the phases. So these schemas changed, were modified in terms of their content across these phases. Schemas were conceptualized as mental organizing elements of experiences. It was actually interesting to note that the results were constructed to show cognitive, affective, and behavioral attributes of schemas, which deviates a little from the literature, which just has a primarily cognitive understanding of schemas. 5 schemas are found to be relevant to Megan's life experiences in terms of suicide. These are the self, life, interpersonal, death, and schemas. Basically what Megan thought, felt, and behaved in relation to these domains of her life. The functions of schemas, basically schemas are shown to have a status. Basically when the suicidal or suicidogenic elements of schemas became activated, this is considered to be a status. When they were inactivated, this is considered to be another status. Recycling of schemas was an interesting process that was actually conceptualized when Megan started to be exposed to quantum physics and Buddhist ideologies of her life, which then resulted in the infiltration of certain non-suicidogenic elements into these schemas. So that is actually referred to as recycling. Now, prior to Megan's understanding of quantum physics and Buddhism, which actually what we're looking at now is what Megan understood about herself and her life and so forth. Earlier on in the interviews, we find that Megan believed herself to be a burden. She called herself, quote, a virus, unquote. She was sad about the way she turned out in life and she wanted to get rid of herself. In terms of interacting with others, here we're looking at the interpersonal schemas, she believed herself to be a burden to others. She was unworthy of interaction. She experienced tremendous guilt about interacting with others, was ambivalent in terms of interacting with others. She wanted to have a sense of belonging, but at the same time she wanted to actually withdraw from them. In terms of life, here we see the exact existential thread coming through in when she saw life as unwanted, purposeless, hopeless, and wanted to withdraw from it. Now I'm coming towards the end. Please bear with me. Towards the end part of the interviews, we find that Megan actually was exposed to information concerning quantum physics and Buddhist elements. And it is interesting to actually note the way in which her schemas started to change in terms of their content, in terms of what she understood quantum physics and Buddhist ideologies to be. So for instance, in terms of the self, she started to differentiate herself in terms of the ego, which she believed to be a conditioned consciousness that resulted from socialization, that is the way you're brought up and so forth, and the observer, which she saw as a silent witness or the soul within herself, which is what Megan actually encountered for the very first time in her life. She also started to perceive herself in terms of energy conceptualizations, which are the focal underpinnings of quantum physics perspectives. And in terms of others, she considered others to be part of this interpersonal energy soup where the illusion of separation existed. It suddenly dawned on her, hey, at a certain level of existence which transcends a physical domain, I am connected to everybody else. So that is what she actually explained very, very interestingly enough. She said, I am connected to everybody else at an energy level, at a quantum physics level. So there was this illusion of separation that she spoke about, and what she also spoke about was the idea of impermanence, a common thread that we saw running through many seminars so far, in that nothing is actually permanent. Buddhist ideologies of impermanence of the self and others. If we go to the life schema, which is very interesting, we found that Megan was actually able to try and construct for herself a purpose for her life, which she saw as the evolution of consciousness. She moved away from looking at time, from moving from the past, present, future, where the past and the future had intricate relationships with the present. So mindfulness became a very, very focal point in her understanding of herself others, and a life. Mindfulness basically meaning being able to situate yourself in the present non-judgmentally, being able to accept the present in a certain way. Obviously, we're not just looking at someone just accepting it, but being able to acknowledge and accept, and if action can be taken, then action be taken. Now, it is quite interesting that during the end of these interviews, Megan actually displayed what I call partial hope. She had hope for herself in trying to understand herself existing, transcending the physical domain. That is, how would she actually interact in the world if she had quantum lenses, if she had ideologies of Buddhism attached to these lenses? And this is what Megan had to say. Yeah, let's go past that. Megan said, and I quote, "I am a spiritual being and I have found my home. My soul observes quietly whilst my ego reacts. I am a soul with a body that is my car. It takes me places. My pain has not gone away fully, but now I know who I am and what I am here to do, and that has made all the difference. At the physical state, we all suffer. At the soul state, we are still. We can laugh at all the illusions of this world and the trickery of the mind." Unquote. Now, it is very interesting that Megan is able to establish this level of understanding. The implications for this are huge in terms of aligning psychotherapeutic practices with the needs of the individual, where the existential and well-being concerns situated within the rubric of spirituality, which is argued to further be situated in positive psychology, needs to be further inculcated into certain psychotherapeutic practices to address the needs of individuals such as Megan. Okay, yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prabhashani. Questions, please? Any questions? Very enlightening lecture. Yes.
Well, sorry. Quantum physics is the modern revolution in physical science. It's what we call the most recent version of physics. It transcends Newtonian physics. Basically, quantum physics is just looking at how human beings exist within an energy rubric. It has to do with atoms and subatomic particles and whatnot, but it's the most recent version of physics. Metaphysics is something that it's almost like spirituality. It transcends the physical kind of domain, but it's not necessarily quantum physics. Certain researchers have actually adopted quantum physics principles within metaphysics, but certain researchers have not done that. So I'm not sure if I'm being clear. One is aligning itself with spirituality, and the other, quantum physics, is not necessarily aligning itself with spirituality. So metaphysics can include spirituality, but quantum physics does not necessarily include spirituality unless you make that distinction or that association. Yes. Deepak Chopra is an example of an individual who has made that association between quantum physics and spirituality, but not all quantum physicists will necessarily associate themselves with spirituality. Okay.
Any other question? Yes. Will you be a little louder, please? Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, you mentioned that her experiences with psychologists was rather poor, to say the least. So how did she open herself to this kind of Buddhist theology or Buddhism or quantum physics or any of these other spiritual aspects, and how did she actually open herself to these?
I think what actually happened in her narrative, in her life experience, was that she became exposed to quantum physics as the modern revolution in science, and that transcended Newtonian physics. So from quantum physics, she then kind of became associated with the writings of Deepak Chopra, and Deepak Chopra makes an association between quantum physics and spirituality. And then I think she started to then kind of engage in literature concerning that, and then she just stumbled on Buddhist ideologies and then put the two together.
So did she say what actually triggered that particular what awakened in her when she heard these talks or she heard these lectures, etc.? Did she, in the course of your interview, in her narratives, did she say, what triggered, or did you analyze what triggered in her? What could be the possible, put it in a very academic context, theoretical, conception of what actually happened within her?
I think I have some kind of interpretations about it because she came from a primarily positivist kind of background, if I can say so, in terms of academia. She was a Master of Science student, so most of the stuff that she was actually encountering in terms of science at school and at university level was primarily Newtonian physics, with quantum physics recently being an exception. So I think when she kind of was exposed to the idea of a silent observer in her readings, of the idea of a soul, for her it was at first quite strange because it didn't kind of fit in with her ideas of science, of empirical studies and stuff like that. So I think that became awakened in her to know that you can exist in life, in the physical world, as another being, and what she called a soul, which was quite interestingly what she kind of put it as going home as a soul. So I think that became awakened in her.
Shall we go to another lecture, please? Thank you. Thank you, Prabhashani.